the main goal for this talk was to talk about LiveFile, actually. But I'm actually probably going to end up going more into convergence than LiveFile, because LiveFile is kind of an end-user tool that we built for our client that uses convergence as the backing technology for it. But the cool stuff is really convergence, so I'll go more into that. So LiveFile is actually a pivot, and I'll give you a little background with our client. He's kind of a startup entrepreneur guy based out of Baltimore, and he found us through convergence, and he was like, hey, you guys are doing real-time collaboration. Like, I've seen some of your other competitors, and it looks like you guys are like a year ahead of everyone else. Like, it looks really cool. And he's like, I want to invest in you guys. And we're like, all right, cool. Like, we may or may not want to take your money, but depending on how much it is and how much runway we can get from that. And then he's like, well, if that's not interested, and he also had an idea for a product. And I was like, well, maybe you can just build your product instead, and then we can kind of move to a consulting kind of arrangement. And that's kind of how Convergence Labs is making it now, is we're just doing consulting for customers, I guess I should get into convergence before I go into all this. So convergence is an API for developers. So how many people know Firebase or know of Firebase? Okay, fair amount. Firebase is like a infrastructure as a service. So basically, it is a hosted API for you to push data in and get data out all in real time. It's basically just a socket connection with a MongoDB backend, and then it synchronizes data, and they have a really nice developer documentation and all these nice DevOps stuff to keep it all up and running, so you don't have to worry about it. You just pay them, and they keep it up and running. It's actually very convenient. Having hosted our own one, it's actually very difficult to do all that and very expensive and time-consuming. So convergence is a similar kind of business model. So we have a SaaS developer API, and we also do data synchronization in real time, but we also, on top of that, we will automatically synchronize data and handle conflicts of data. So the most common use case is like Google Docs or Google Sheets, where you have multiple people actually in the same document. You can see where each person is and a little cursor and selections or whatever. As you can imagine, handling conflicts where people are kind of writing on top of each other and editing different parts of the same document, it's actually really hard to figure out how to get all that data to synchronize, and so that it actually appears the same for everybody else. And there's a few algorithms that go into it, which I won't go into because it's super complex. And we actually built a product so that you don't have to think about these sorts of things. So that's convergence. We are trying to move more into kind of an on-premise installation setup, such that instead of Firebase, where you just pay the money and they just host it for you, we're actually going to provide the Docker container so that you can install on your own servers, and then pay us a license to have that. And that just makes it way easier for us. We would actually have to maintain the DevOps part of it, which we would need to hire someone for sure to actually make that go. With a decent amount of users. So LiveFile. So this client we've had for about a year now. Started out with a different idea that was much more ambitious, called Hallway, which was it was basically a real-time collaborative operating system. So imagine you have your Mac. Imagine if other people could log onto your Mac, and you could all of your applications were real-time collaborative, such that you launch Word, and someone else is in there, and you can see who's kind of logged into your computer. And it was that, but it was on the web. So we were going to build an app store and have developers contribute stuff to it. It was this huge, grandiose idea, and we're like, cool, sounds like a great idea, and he basically gave us 6 months to kind of see how far we could get. And from the beginning, I was like, you're going to need to spend $2 million to get anything reasonable that's actually usable. And yeah, I got about 6 months in. We actually got pretty far into it. I wish I had a version of it that's still running, but ended up pivoting into this LiveFile, which was basically one potential application within this kind of greater platform kind of operating system concept. And what LiveFile is it's essentially like Google Docs but for PDFs. So why don't I just log in and show you? I don't know if anyone's probably not watched the video yet. Oh yeah, we actually launched on Product Hunt today, which was not actually planned. That's just a total coincidence. But if anyone voted for us, thank you. If not, no worries. So LiveFile, let me just go into this guy. Looks like I'm in there twice. Oh well. Anyone else want to go into this? You just type in that URL, and then you can collaborate with us. And there you should pop up on the right there. Yeah, number 3. And then you can kind of move your cursor around and select tools, and yeah. And if you have a cat, of course, it'll show your name, and you can pick your own color and that sort of thing. Not too many people. I don't want to kill the killer system. But yeah, you know, with all of like everything that uses convergence, like the demo is, you know, it's critical. It's actually really hard to sell any of these products on their own because you actually have to have 2 people to have it be compelling and like interesting. So yeah, LiveFile is it's kind of a technology looking for a use case, I'd say, to some extent, and some of our challenge has been kind of figuring out what that is. But I am the presenter, and so everyone else who's connected will automatically scroll. So basically everyone who's viewing this, I don't know if you can look over people's shoulders who's connected, but as I scroll, like their viewport also scrolls at the same time, and you know, you can see what other people are doing, and people are typing and doing things, which is great. And so, yeah, we came up with a few potential use cases, and you know, we're really at this stage where, what is that, 10 people there, where we're still kind of figuring out the best applications for this. So if anyone has any great ideas, like please let me know after this talk, and I'd love to talk about it. But yeah, so that's kind of I mean, this is it. Like, it's really just a one-page thing. When you land on when you first sign up, it'll kind of dump you into it's basically just a file upload panel. You just drag a file in, and you know, it just spits you into here, and then you can click this little button up here to invite people. It's super simple by design, kind of an MVP. So I feel like I should exit out of this at some point. So let me just get into the tech stack a little bit of LiveFile. So the guy that I hired to do this, Tim, I was hoping he would be here, but he couldn't make it. He's like a super React fanboy, and so he was like, you know, he actually has his own like what they call like a starter kit, where like Webpack and all that's kind of built in. He like built his own through his own consulting company. He's like, yeah, we're going to use this like starter kit. It's going to be the sweet isomorphic, you know, React application. I have mixed feelings about like server-side React stuff, but it might be because I'm just not used to it, and I've been doing it the old way for 10 years. Yeah, it's sometimes a little glitchy. But yeah, it's a server-side rendered app. But obviously, all of this necessarily needs to be on the client, just because the Convergence API is, you know, it's designed to be used on a browser environment. Yeah, Convergence doesn't like something. It's booting me out. But basically what the app is we're using a PDF library called PS PDF Kit. Has anyone used any PDF? Yeah, nice. Yeah, there's some really cool ones out there, and like you would think that there wouldn't be a lot of money or interest in PDF libraries, but actually like it's a pretty huge market. And for instance, I looked into PDF.js, I think, is one of the alternatives. And so Firefox actually uses, it's basically what PDF.js is just like a way of like completely native like JavaScript rendering of PDF documents. And it was good enough that they actually, Mozilla built it and they used it in Firefox as the actual tool that renders PDF when you like drag a file to Firefox. That's what actually renders it. But we kind of like looked into it, the pros and cons, and apparently it doesn't render certain files get corrupted when it renders or whatever. So we ended up going with PS PDF Kit, which is kind of one of the newer kids on the block, and kind of needed to evaluate it too. And this is kind of something we have done with a lot of different libraries, is we kind of go into it and we find out what sort of event hooks they have for us to be able to listen to the granular enough events that we can actually, listen to data and then push it out. Because most apps are not designed with this sort of use case in mind. So we found we actually need to, if it's open source, we can just kind of build our own hooks in to get the two technologies playing together. Or for PS PDF Kit, it's a proprietary thing. We pay like, $9,000 a year or something to get access to that. And then they have really good support, and it's actually been really useful. But basically, all LiveFile is PS PDF Kit and convergence, and we built it in like 3 months, and this is it. So, convergence brings a lot to the table. It does all the heavy lifting of data transfer, and these like avatars up in the top right. There are a few components of our API. So there's like the real-time data transfer, which is the obvious part, and then there's a couple pieces having to do with collaborative queuing, is what we call it. And it's basically UX constructs that have to do with collaboration. So this is, where's that link? I don't think there's any links out here. Where was I? Oh yeah, the activity API. So in any collaborative application, you kind of need to know where other people are in order so that you don't trample on each other. Like if you think about like Google Docs, if you didn't have a shared cursor, like you'd just be typing and then other people are typing on top of you and you'd have no idea that was happening. And if you don't have selections and like the whole cursor, like shared cursors, it's all actually like vital to having a useful collaborative application. And so we actually went and built into our API first-class constructs for doing these, first-class support for doing these UX constructs like cursors and selections and that sort of thing. And an example of that is this guy. So we keep on running into things that the web wasn't really designed to do, and one of those is like rendering that little that colored cursor, which is basically just an absolutely positioned div on top of this text area. And then the API that we provide is basically like, like render cursor, pass in a color and a number, which represents the position in this text area, which is just a block of text. And then we actually do I don't know if anyone's actually had to do this, but calculating, like figuring out like the line height of each line and the font that you're using, and then calculating like where you are in the document based on basically all you have is an index of text, and you have to find out where that is in the text area or a text area or an input field or whatever. It's actually a huge pain in the ass. And so we kind of did it all, and then provide a little API so that you can just say, hey, render this cursor at this point, and it just like works. So this is kind of the sorts of things that we built and released as open source components that people can use with whatever. There's a few competing technologies, both open source. Actually, yeah, most of them are open source that do kind of parts of what we do. And so, you could take this and use it with whatever, and that's fine. We actually just want to see more collaborative apps out there because there aren't really that many good examples that I can point to, and we're trying to move the needle there. So, yeah, I was going into the participant stuff. So yeah, there's a few constructs for doing those UX things. So not everything you actually want to persist. Like these annotations are actually being persisted, which makes sense. When I refresh the page, it actually just loads out of the convergence model all these annotations and then just renders them through PSPDFKit, just on top of the document. But there's certain things you don't want to persist, and this is one of the big weaknesses with Firebase. I don't know if they've remedied this, but you can't just like have a transient piece of data go over the wire and not be persisted. You actually have to say, if I want to keep track of someone's cursor, I'll have to say, username, whatever, position, XY coordinates, like stick it in this database. And then that it gets synchronized with everyone who's connected. But as soon as everyone leaves, like no one cares where people were. So what we did is we provided an API to just transfer that over the wire, but it never persists. It just uses the same technology to do any data conflicts or anything, but then actually just spits it out on the other end, but doesn't persist it. And then we actually have a first class concept of users in the system in order to do things like knowing who did what so that you can do undo and redo in a global manner. And that's another really, really difficult problem for this sort of thing, is figuring out how to do undo and redo, because if you have like state that crosses different people. If you think about, like, if I just undo the last thing that happened to the system, it might have been what Joe did over here. And that's not what you want. So you actually have to keep track of who does what, and then be able to figure out, the last thing that I want to undo maybe was like the 30th thing that was done because Joe did 29 changes since then. So you actually have to go back and cherry pick that one and remove it. So that's the kind of thing that convergence does that is extremely difficult to do otherwise.
Is there anything like remote functions, like in gaming, where you actually send two signals, one to the local guy so he uploads immediately, and another goes out to the network, and it may have some lag with the local player? Is it similar to that, or you have to have one and one?
Yeah, so it's designed to actually, like, the latency doesn't really matter. Like one way you could use this is just as like an offline mode. You could just keep track of every single like change that you've made locally, and then as soon as you reconnect, you just like push every like mutation, and it just like puts it all up there. So you just keep track of literally every single, like, deleted this character at this index, and then inserted these 30 characters at this index, and you just keep track of all those, and then you push it up. And so it actually doesn't matter. I mean, it's not like it's like screen sharing or video, such that if you lose, if you have latency, then it's gonna be hard to communicate. It's designed such that if there is latency, you may not know it, because all you see is what's coming to you at that point in time. But it's not like a phone call where, if there's a delay, like it's obvious.
If user one is offline, like you mentioned, make some changes and they haven't gone online yet, but user two changes some things before, the base that user one was going off of is now different than the base that user two made changes. So whenever user one goes online, it's supposed to push all these changes up. Yeah. How does it handle those conflicts?
Yeah, so certain conflicts, you can't really deal with them. I mean, we have, basically it's like if you think about, so basically the data model that we support currently for a like main data set is just everything that JSON supports. So strings, numbers, objects, arrays, Booleans. And if you think about a tree of the potential like different combinations of every single one of those within a tree, like we can handle any two operations of any of those. So I don't know what the the set of that is, but it's like thousands of different potential like collisions. So basically all of those we've actually modeled in the system. And so we can algorithmically do those changes, but there's certain things that you just can't resolve. Like if one person, inserts some text, another person deletes it, it's like who wins? It's like you don't know. You just have to probably just take the last person's changes and have that override it. And which is why we do things like the collaborative queues, because the more that people know where they are in the system, the less they'll kind of trample over each other, and that's what you want anyway. But in the case of like offline mode, it's like if you have, we actually have another client who we're gonna have to kind of deal with this probably with just the way that we design the UI, where if you have multiple people that are offline, and you need to rejoin again, you really need a way to actually like a git merge. Like you need a UI to actually get that to merge back in. You can't really do it in a meaningful way just with an algorithm. There's a few other demos that we've done. A couple of them I did at my last talk here, but I think they're interesting enough to do again. Let's start with this one. This one I don't think we've touched in a long time, so it might be broken. This one I actually just tested like an hour ago. Any volunteers again? So all of the interesting demos that we have, we basically took either an open source or a proprietary library, and we're like, hey, what would happen if we just add convergence to this? And you take, like, this is the Rapid library, which is built on top of Joint.js. Has anyone done any like graphing programming or like with Lucid Chart or anything like that? Yeah, so it's fun, and it's like a pretty obvious use case for collaboration. It's like visually oriented. I think Lucid might actually have some like real-time capabilities. I know some of them already do, but we actually approached these guys. They're out of the Czech Republic, and after building this demo, and we're like, "Hey, look what we built." They're like, "Ooh, this is very interesting," and so we're actually in talks with them to do in their next major release to actually do a convergence powered real-time collaboration like feature for them. So Rapid is kind of it's the licensed version of Joint.js, which is an open source. It's basically this, but without some of the like built-in bells and whistles and like some of their nifty features. So yeah, we just took their libraries. It's a similar process. We kind of look through the code and see what sort of hooks they have and how granular they are. And then sometimes we have to do some hacks to kind of get things to render properly. But it's usually pretty easy. I mean, I think it took Michael, my co-founder, like I think it was about 2 weeks to build this, and that was maybe like half time to do that. Yes, any username will work. We don't lock it out anyway. You can just hit a toggle to turn anonymous mode on, where anyone can connect, which is obviously terrible for security, but it's very convenient for doing demos.
Is there are there more than one mode? Like this looks like anybody can grab anything simultaneously. Is there a mode where you can say, all right, it's your turn, and nobody else can move things while he has his turn, and then he's done, and you flip to the other user? Yep,
so it's up to the app to do that sort of thing. Like all of our demos is kind of like the kitchen sink. It's like, do whatever you want, But for a realistic application, like you want to have some sort of authorization or giving controls and revoking controls or whatever. Like for the LiveFile demo, like most applications we actually haven't built in much authorization controls, but in the product we have, in the Conversions API, we have pretty basic authorization controls for who can do what and whatever. But it's actually up to you as the app developer to say, you know, and it's, you know, it's just a UX part of your UX or UI to kind of build that in, and then you can use Conversions, you know, to either help or not with that. But yeah, we just kind of have a pretty high level view of, you know, we'll provide this stuff. You design an application that, you know, that works for you, and we try not to like be heavy-handed with what we do. So what else did we do? We actually have a pretty basic chat API. So like Firebase, for instance, you can do chat. And actually that was one of the first things that people used it for, like really commonly. It's like, oh, I can do chat in like, you know, a day. And it just like sends the messages for you, and you just build a UI to go around that. Yeah, this example's been up for a long time. But yeah, we have an API for creating chat rooms, for joining chat rooms, for sending messages, for sending group messages, that sort of thing. It's all, but it's actually like a first-class API versus just sending data, you know, and having each application kind of form the data in a way that makes sense for chat. It's just like, it's just there and it works. And it's just, and to either persist it or not, you can just flip a switch in the API to do it. This is an example of our activity API. It's actually, the LiveFile is actually a much better example of that, because we actually put some effort into making that look a little better. The other cool one is this one. So every single one of these should, like anyone who comes here, they should just like, they're just, I should actually probably show you the code to it. It's like ridiculously simple. But yeah, like, you know, here's a collaborative text field, here's a collaborative text area, collaborative checkbox, and so on and so forth. This is really hard to control way up here. So yeah, 51 lines. I guess we're kind of cheating by using these helper functions. Does anyone have any questions about like architecture or any like technical questions about how we like did either convergence to platform or any of these individual examples or demos?
Have you guys tested traffic, like load tested your servers to see how much traffic you can handle, things in that realm?
Yeah, so funny you say that. So we launched on ProductCon with LiveFile today. And actually, so Tim, there's a React or a Reddit subreddit. I think it's like a React-based one. I don't know if any of you have gone to it. He posted on the, I think it's like what I built or something, like subreddit for that. And he's like, look what I built. And he just like posted a link to one of the rooms in LiveFile, and we got like 40 people to come in. And it did actually. Like I think it lasted through about 30 people, and they would come and go, and eventually like something happened that we have yet to figure out because it only happened like a few hours ago. But yeah, the model that was holding that data, something happened to it and it got corrupted or something. It ended up going down. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we got like a couple dozen people in there, and and you can see that it's designed such that the messages are like about as small as you can actually get, as far as like every message that goes over the wire. And then it was architected from the beginning to be pretty lightweight and fast and responsive. And I don't think there's anything out there that is quite as responsive as what we've done with the real-time stuff.
Okay, so basically when you have multiple users, it's constantly sending requests, post and get requests basically back and forth through your API, your server that you have. Do you have multiple servers? Like, do you scale them either direction in terms of how you work it with animal tracker, things like that? Are you planning on that?
Yeah, so we have a load balanced front end and back end nodes, and then those can scale out. And the technology we use is Akka, which is like a messaging API written in Scala, which is what most of the servers was written in. And then we've actually, in the past year or so, we've moved all of our Docker stuff into a greater orchestrated Kubernetes thing. I didn't do any of this. My partner did, but it's pretty nice. And part of that was getting into like how can we actually have the scale out and have a clustered database and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of effort that went into that. But on the client, it's basically just a WebSocket that connects to our server. It's just like, I mean, if you looked at the network tab as this is going over, it's just like zzz. It's like, yeah, thousands of messages potentially a second. But it does handle it pretty well. And also, like for most use cases, like as you saw with the LiveFile, it's just chaos once you get more than like 5 people in there anyway. So it's best as an application designer to actually design in a way that you can limit like who's doing what. Like there's one presenter, or there's like a few collaborators, or maybe it's just the case that there's only a few use cases where there's only like 2 to 5 people actually like collaborating together on the same document. We have to kind of, as a company, we have to kind of figure out what the sweet spot for those use cases are versus like something like Twitch, where you're like broadcasting to lots of people, or like teaching or something like that.
When you're doing the live view or the live file presenting, is it just set up so that the presenter can control where everybody sees, or can it be set up so that different people can be working on different parts of the file at the same time?
Yep. So by default, the presenter, as they scroll, everyone else's view will scroll. But as an audience, or as part of an audience, you can actually detach at any time and then kind of move around, move back to the last page or whatever, and it'll just give you a little message that says you have detached from the room, or you have detached from the presenter, and then there's a little join button to snap back to where the presenter is again.
But you're still working on the same file at the same time. So with that, do you guys handle the messages differently? Like say if the presenter is displaying something up there and there's 5 people editing up there, but you're in a different view, do you have a way of basically saying I don't need blocking basically all the traffic, so that would handle that would, I guess, slow down the network traffic problems a little bit, so different people could be working in different parts.
Right. Yeah. So you could design your app in a way such that if changes are happening to page 1 and you can only see page 5, then you would just ignore it. I think the way that we did this was the simpler use case, where and so I was talking about kind of the real-time data part of it, and then the like activity and activity part of it, or there's transient data and there's like persistent data. So the viewport is going to be transient. Like you don't really care afterwards. Once everyone leaves, doesn't matter where the viewport is. But that's actually going through a slightly different system than the actual annotations that are drawn on the screen. And so it's actually pretty easy. If I've detached from the presenter, that I just stop listening or ignore those messages that are like, where is the presenter right now? You know, and yeah. And you can definitely see for like a large file with a lot of different people that we would probably have to kind of think more carefully about ignoring like page 300 if there's like 30 people in the file or whatever, which you could actually see doing. But yeah, there'd be some performance considerations for that for sure. Yeah, I think that's about all I have. I'm happy to go into like kind of startup specific stuff if ever anyone has any questions or wants to kind of ask me questions afterwards. I feel like I've learned some things over the past 3 years that I'm happy to talk about also privately or not. I'll be at the Silicon Soap Summit. I think that's in like a week or two. I don't know if anyone's going to that, but I'll be wandering around like showing convergence off to whoever will listen to me. So if you see me, come and tap me on the shoulder, and I'll, talk your ear off about it. But yeah, I think that's about it. Are there any other speakers, Ken? Is it just me?
Just you.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
Do you have to do anything for React performance with all the real-time stuff, like the amount of text you need to re-render based on all data?
So we found React to actually be a really good fit for it. The way that it's designed, you can hook into convergence at a certain, so the way that you generally architect your data model is kind of a tree, and then the way that React renders their DOM is also the tree. And so it's often that pieces of those are aligned with each other, and so you can have a certain component that's maybe higher up in the page just listen to changes at this node of the tree and everywhere below it, and it's just like one call that's like, if any of these things change, re-render that entire component. And so it's actually really simple to do that sort of thing, and the performance is React's super fast, so that's not the bottleneck for sure. So yeah, I think that's been the cleanest implementation, and actually the code editor is React that I don't think it was working, but yeah, I mean, we wrote that pretty quickly, and I was really impressed with how easy it was to do. Anybody else? All right.